Yes, thanks Morgan for warming up the room after lunch. I know it's a hard spot to be in. Welcome from the Netherlands. As Louise said, we run the major local, I would say, generalist job boards in the Netherlands. Job boards that are based on still a very traditional business model, yeah? A fixed price, duration business model with slots, basically. What we wanted to share with you this afternoon is some of our experiments and learnings in transitioning to a performance-based pricing model, which is, by the way, a hard thing to do. So a bit of context, as I said, we run the major local job boards, but we're part of a big media company called DPG Media, which is the largest media company in the Netherlands and Belgium and Denmark. And apart from job boards, we own the major newspapers, radio channels, and TV channels as well. But why are we talking about this topic? Basically, as I would say, an old job board, we're delving into this topic of performance-based pricing mainly for three reasons. One is that it really forces us to focus on delivering value and performance to our B2B clients, number one. Number two, we hope that by doing so, it will also give us new clients and we're able to attract new clients. And thirdly, I would argue that perhaps we don't have a choice, and we see it as in the long run as a more sustainable business model. Because if I look at our local market, a market which is for jobs dominated, unfortunately, by Indeed, and a market that's also been educated by Google in CPC advertising, we view that in the long run, we need to experiment and move towards this model.
Yeah, so
up to you.
Dennis told you why we had to move, but how did we do it? We really wanted to have an MVP approach, and I think when we look back, these were the 5 building blocks that we wanted to tick off before starting all the experiments. And I will show you in the next slides what we did, what decisions did we make, and what lessons we learned. And afterwards, it's up to Dennis again to give you key takeaways of what we learned in this transition. So first, what we did was really lay out the groundworks to see what did our clients think about transitioning to a performance-based pricing model. But also we had a consultancy company that helped us really assess the financial impact, the risk that we might have on potential buyers and our current revenue stream. And they said that if we would switch overnight, it was a 10 to 20% decrease, 10 to 20% percentage decrease on the current revenue stream. Of course, that was not their advice, but it will give you a feeling on what the impact could be. We also did a survey on 2,000 clients, churned clients, and what we saw there that we're really positive about this new model. And at last, we wanted to have a starting point for our pricing, so we did a performance analysis to see what starting point should we get into when laying out all the first experiments. So we had this consultancy company that advised us to have a certain approach. We had positive feedback from our clients, and we had a starting point for our prices. We could, that's the next slide. This is a little bit the way that we conducted the analysis on our historical data. You can choose what type of analysis you can do. We looked into job types, we looked into client segments, education and region, and on the graphic on your right side, you see that the range was quite big if you look at the segments and you looked at job titles. It was here. But for our price points, we just started somewhere in the middle. But it will give you an idea of what you can look into to get a knowledge of your starting point. So now is the time to start experimenting. And we touched a few things. We looked at target audiences, and pricing, channels and performance models. The target audiences, we start with win-back. So our churned customers, they were very positive. In the past, they had some negative. In the past, they were of course not our clients anymore, because they have had a vacancy live on our platform that didn't perform the way they wanted. But now, with this no cure, no pay proposition, it was another discussion. Because if there was no performance on the vacancy, they didn't have to pay. So we could attract those clients back to our platform. We also had some agencies that were, of course, quite familiar with this model, but very positive that we wanted to have some tests and really had the possibility now to gain qualitative traffic. Looking to pricing, we looked into a few things, categories, buckets. We started at a price point, then lowered the price point, and we saw that both both SME clients and agencies were okay with that a price for a secretary and a price for an IT worker were different. Agencies were familiar with performance-based pricing. SME weren't, so we really had to inform them more about what it is, this performance-based pricing model, and that's why we made flyers and we adjusted the landing page to more inform them of what it is, in which part of the funnel are you going to pay for. We also had a few channels that we tried out. So CRM, it was quite a good way of conducting some tests because you can lay a few A/B tests next to each other, but we only have so much people in our opt-in base. You don't want to spam them and you don't want to get them to opt out. So I think we were more positive about the dedicated sales team that we set out. We trained them on a new model. We gave them all the information they need. And I think what's very important is they got an adjustment on their commission model. For the performance-based models, we tried also a few things. Apply per click, apply per job title page, apply per hire. But our hypothesis was that they were be more interested in going deeper into the funnel, more qualitative pay-per-clicks. Because, if you could only pay for a hire, why wouldn't you do that? But we saw that with every test that we did, people were more interested in paying per click on the apply button. So they want to be more in control themselves and filter the vacancies out later. What we also did with this MVP approach was we wanted to mitigate the risk. And we wanted to control the cannibalization of our current revenue stream. And we did that with three things. So the process, it was an MVP, it was agile, it was with a multidisciplinary team, and with every iteration that we did, we just went back to the drawing board and discussed what next step do we want to take and how can we mitigate the risk. We had a dedicated sales team, as I said. We used our direct channels, so dedicated sales, CRM. We didn't put it live on the web shop or on the website. And the dedicated sales team had a list of customers they could call. We first set it out on new business customers, and then, of course, the churned clients to attract them back to the job site. For our support system, we didn't have a fancy dashboard, but we did have a dashboard that measured all our performance, and it got the information that we needed. Also, very hands-on approach, but it was what we needed, and in between every iteration, we would get back to that data dashboard and then or data model, and made the right decisions. So you can mitigate the risk a lot by, as I just said, keep it small, iterate every step, and but in the end, if you want to transition to a new model, and we're not sure yet if we're going to transition completely or it's going to be a hybrid model, but you need to take some short-term losses to be relevant and sustainable in the future. So that in the end, we'll be in our happy place where the new model revenue stream is performing quite good. And I think when you're considering turning into transitioning to a new model, focus on your current customers and gain new revenue by this new model. And what we saw and what we want as a company is to be perceived as a qualitative job board, so that we don't want to start out a bidding war for our performance-based price model, because our B2C clients, our candidates, want to have relevant jobs at the top of their search, and not the jobs that are being paid more for. So now it's up to Dennis to show what the lessons were.
Okay, thanks, Kayleigh. So to sum up some of the lessons learned, so to put it in time perspective, we started with this journey about just before summer last year. So we're about a year, a bit more than a year into this. And if we look at this transitioning, I think one of the things that we learned is that the steps you take in this transitioning are actually quite similar to what we've heard from other job boards. The decision, however, per step, or the outcome per step, might be different. So here are some of the key lessons learned. As Kayleigh mentioned, the financial risk of switching overnight from fixed price duration to performance-based pricing can be huge. Yeah, it can be, if low range estimates are 10 to 20%, but we also heard from other job boards that it could be up to 65% revenue loss overnight if you switch overnight. So obviously, switching overnight is then not a good thing to do, meaning that it shouldn't be a big bang, but it should be a transition over time with small iterations. Number one. Number two is, if you want to mitigate financial risk, then you need to think very carefully about which customer segments you start to expose this to and you start to roll it out. And as we said, what we found out, or what worked for us so far, worked pretty well, is to start with new business, then win back business, and only then roll it out to your recurring business customers. Number three, also very important indeed, as revenue flows in differently than in your traditional model, you should align your sales to the new model, but also align your commission models to the new model, and also make sure that finance is up to date, because cash flow management will also work differently in such a model. Number four is around how you price, and we had a lot of debate about this one internally, and in the end we said we'll start with a fixed pricing instead of a bidding system. Yeah, so a lot of companies use a bidding system, but we said we'll start with a fixed price per job category, and depending on the scarcity of the job category, the price can be different. But the fixed price was for us important for two reasons. One, it was easier to start with a fixed price than with a bidding model. Number one. And number two, what we heard back from our customers is also that a fixed price was for them a lot more transparent. Yeah? So what we heard back from a lot of our customers is that who worked actually with CPC bidding models, is that it was intransparent to them what they would end up paying in the end. Yeah? And a fixed price was a lot more predictable. Number five is, and as Kayleigh also mentioned, we experimented with a couple of different variations of the definition of performance. Yeah? Is performance a view on the product detail page? Is performance a click on the apply button? Is performance a actual application? Is performance an actual hire? And what we learned here as well is that, in the end, a click on the product or job detail page is not what recruiters want. Yeah, they want applies. So a click on the product detail page doesn't add real value. But on the other hand, and I'll come to that later, the model whereby we needed to pay per hire was also not for us a good model. So we ended up with actually sticking to a model whereby we price per apply or apply click. Number six is an obvious one, of course, please measure and evaluate continuously. And last but not least, number seven is not to be underestimated. It's about company politics and company expectations. Yeah? If you don't do that well, then you might get into trouble. So I spoke to this before, that the steps might be similar, but the outcome per step might be different. And one of the factors that comes into play here is, the country that you work in, and especially how digitally advanced your country is. What I mean by that is if you work or operate in a country where digital penetration is very high, and especially where your business clients are used to performance-based advertising, then I would advocate that it's needed to move even faster than in some other countries. As I mentioned before, we also experimented with a model whereby we actually have a performance whereby we pay per hire. And we started to do that, actually this one we started to do already more than 2 years ago, whereby we launched a new proposition called Elect. And the best description of this proposition is what I think Indeed does as well. It's seen by Indeed. This is exactly the same thing. It's aimed at the IT market, whereby we pay per hire. And we launched this new proposition under a new brand, and we had actually 4 learnings from that in the last 2 years. One is that it was very hard for us as an established big player to basically build and launch a new brand. Yeah? As a media company, we have a history of making acquisitions, not of launching new brands, number one. Number two, a bit of an obvious one, but still important. We started off with an MVP, but then it's very, very important to commit the resources so that you can scale in a later stage. The third one was actually a hard one for us. We called it the classical classifieds chicken and egg problem. For those of you who have been around in classifieds a bit longer, you are familiar with this problem. What comes first? Is it the demand or the supply side? And if you work in classifieds and you launch a new classified site, then one would argue that the supply side comes first. You get supply on your platform, and then traffic will come. However, what we find here with this model is that we underestimated that it actually had to be different, that we had to build up our profile database first before we got actually the supply in. And last but not least, number 4 is we decided to step away from the pay-per-hire model for the simple reason that for us we found out that there were so many factors that we couldn't influence in the interviewing and hiring process that we said, for us that's not a good model to operate in. Another learning here is, which model is best suited to which type of customer segment. And what we found here is that it's hugely correlated with how sophisticated your clients are. And typically, if you have big staffing agencies as a client, or you have big corporate clients, they have sophisticated marketing departments and are usually accustomed to buying on a performance-based basis, so those customers actually are demanding for such a system. If you are, however, an SME customer, as Kayleigh mentioned, although they used to pay CPC to Google, we still found that it was kind of harder to convince them to actually take up a performance-based pricing model. And we had to educate them a lot more because they actually liked the transparency and the predictability of a fixed price and of a fixed price package. So if you would ask to us now, what model will you end up with? I think the fair answer is to say that for the foreseeable future, we envisage that we will have both models running in parallel next to each other. Last slide is kind of, okay, so we're now at a certain level into kind of experimenting with this. And as Kayleigh said, we do it actually below the radar for financial reasons. But the next steps that we need to take is, number 1, is we now at a stage whereby, although we do it below the radar, and although we do it in a kind of MVP mode, we kind of ended up with having already quite a large number of clients on a performance-based pricing model. And as we do it more on a spreadsheet manual basis, for us it's not not doable anymore to run it in this way. So we need to basically scale the platform and scale the processes so that we can run it out to more clients, which is step number 2. Open it up to a larger customer segment base. And for us, the scary point will be our recurring business. Yeah? How will we deal with that? How will we, if at all, transition those clients to this model? Still question mark, I don't know yet. And number three is actually last but not least. And we talked about step number 3 with actually quite a couple of people here also during the conference, is linking both sides of our marketplace. So, most of us run a 2-sided marketplace with supply and demand, and we need to be able to link traffic acquisition across channels to basically the budgets that are set and the prices that we agree with our business customers. And to give you an idea, what we do now at the moment is the performance-based pricing contracts we close with our clients are, they give us a budget, we agree a certain price, but at the moment we're not able to steer our traffic acquisition at an individual job level so that we can actually fulfill the prices. And so that's really a step that we need to be able to make, but a step not only through aggregator channels, but across channels. How are we on time? 2 minutes. Okay. So I'll leave you with this parting thought. From our point of view, experimenting with this transition is, for us, it's not a choice if we're going to transition to a performance-based pricing model, but it's more a question of, how and when we're going to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis and Kayleigh.